January 29th meeting of the Knox County Audit Committee. This was rescheduled for earlier this week, so appreciate everybody's flexibility with the winter storm. To start out, we'll go ahead and start with the roll call.
Mr. Jim Morrison.
Here.
Mr. Matthew Warren.
Here.
Commissioner Jackson.
Here.
Commissioner Jay.
Here.
Commissioner Thompson.
Here.
All members are present.
Excellent. Commissioner Jay, could you please?
If you're able, please stand and remember your salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With that, I think we've circulated the minutes from our previous meeting in the fourth quarter of 2025. There's a motion. Go ahead.
Motion to approve is presented.
Wait a second. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. And with that, I think we can transition over to Ted for the external audit update. I think you're going to cover, I think everybody received via email the school's audit last week. All my data.
Correct. Before I forget, I'll go ahead and cover 2B quickly on the agenda, which is just an update. The financial audit report has been released. The ACFR has been released. That was released in mid-January. So that report is available. I don't know if, Perry, has that been distributed?
Well, we've made hard copies. I think we need to get, let me check and see if it's on that website.
Okay. But if not, we can still get it to the audit committee. I know it really goes to the finance committee for discussion, but we'll make that available. And then the compliance audit, which does get, compliance report, which does get presented here, that's in the wrap-up stage. Draft findings have been presented, and now we're just going through that. So in the next couple of weeks, that report will be ready. So it's in good shape.
Before you go off that topic, I know we'll talk later about just the plan for the next meeting. And I'll have to look at the commission calendar, but when does, I know you said a couple of weeks, but
I'm aiming to be able to release the report, by 2 weeks from tomorrow. Probably if you allow 1 week of buffer and 1 week so that there's enough time so that the audit committee can review it prior to the meeting. We're probably looking about 4 weeks out from when we should meet again.
So perhaps early to mid-March. We'll have to check the calendar.
Okay.
I just know that's one of the big things we want to cover in the next week.
Certainly.
What's the internal review of the school board? When you get done with this, do they have their own internal meeting of some sort that reviews it with you, with their board as a whole?
You already met with them? I assume you did.
Regarding the internal school funds,
Just anything that you report on the school, do they, separate of this, or do you guys take it under consideration?
He's already presented to us.
Okay.
I have presented, as Rod said, I have presented to the school board as well. I have met with the superintendent, assistant superintendents, and we had a detailed meeting going over the findings specific to this report. Any findings that are in the county compliance report, we will also discuss at length as well. With that, I'll go ahead and start on going over the Knox County internal school funds audit report. It is a huge report. What I would recommend is, I imagine you probably follow along on your computer by the PDF file. The best guide for following it is using the table of contents and then going to the report page. But for the different sections that we're going to go over, I did earmark PDF page numbers, which is the easiest one to turn to because they're going to be different from the report pages. But in general, as we go through this, we'll shortly get into findings. some of the documentation area findings such as receipts, disbursements, purchase orders. We had an increase in instances. Other type findings related to really administrative oversight, there was a notable decrease in findings. So that was kind of the give and take from the audit, from the overall perspective. As far as the schools and internal school funds go, we also issued, there was like a short audit communication letter. I'm not going to go over that because really not a lot of details in there. There would be a lot of detail in there if there were a lot of like accounting estimates and so forth. This is more or less a cash receipts and disbursements audit. So typically that letter would refer to other items, and like for Knox County, it's a significant report because there's a lot of things that we factor in. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that letter, or really any time on that letter, unless there's any specific questions on it. I just presented that to you because it required communication to the audit committee.
Okay. Questions for me?
Okay. Then on the big report, the audit report, on PDF page 8, this report page, Roman numeral 2, is our audit opinion. And as a reminder for internal school fund audit reports in the state of Tennessee, there's a regulatory basis of accounting that we use. So the audit report looks a little funny. We actually issue an adverse opinion on U.S. generally accepted accounting principles, but that's required by state law, and then an unmodified opinion on the regulatory basis of accounting. So just, if you read the report itself here and afterwards and said, looks strange, it's really just a standard report for an internal school funds audit. So it's a clean opinion on the regulatory body, regulatory basis of accounting that we're required to report under in the state of Tennessee. I'm going to skip to PDF page 11 through 14, specifically page 12. 11 and 12 are in their page, actual page number 1 and 2. The combined balance sheet was basically listed by school. And just to kind of go over the magnitude of the total transactions that we look at and total balances, cash, which is in the total cash of all 90 plus schools for Knox County schools, was the total at the bottom of PDF page 12 were $18,654,448. So $18 million, obviously a lot of money is held within the individual school funds. Just want to also reiterate while I'm thinking about it that, again, this is an audit of the funds held in the individual schools. It does not include transactions in the central office. Central office transactions are included in the actual report. Then on pages 13 and 14, basically the income statement by school, and on the bottom of 14, in the second and third columns, you'll see that total revenues, which mirror receipts, were about 27.5 million, 27.6 million, and total expenditures for disbursements were nearly 25.8 million. So in total, many of the transactions are pretty small, but in total, they really are significant. And you'll see that over half of that, of both numbers, comes at the high school level. So let's go ahead and jump forward to the end of the report and talk about the findings. First of all, there's a summary report, which is on PDF page 401. And this is really your compliance report, and it will reference at the bottom of PDF page 401 or report page 389 that we indicated certain findings. That's also mentioned on the top of the next page. So, but this is just really the standard summary report for a report conducted in accordance with the government auditing standards. Then on the next page, PDF page 403, start the individual findings. And paper Typically, I'll leave it up to the audit committee, but I typically take these one by one, and you can stop me with any questions on any of them. Segregation of duties. It's certainly a challenge in smaller schools where you basically have, or really a small office. You basically have one administrative person who serves as a bookkeeper and also as doubles as an office assistant and a principal. Really small offices, so segregation of duties is a challenge. We had 49 schools where we felt there was segregation of duties issue this year. That compared to 44 schools the year before, and probably pretty consistent with the previous year. That in itself, impacts other findings in the report because of lack of segregation of duties. Limits oversight.
Does each individual school breach a materiality? If something happened.
Really, this is more of a compliance matter as opposed to a dollar amount matter. You could consider it the sum of transactions that, like for instance, you might have a bookkeeper who basically handles the entire cycle of collecting money or receiving money and then also recording money. So
I guess what I'm asking is, if one small school, had, a decent amount of fraud out of it, would that reach a level of materiality in the audit report?
If that, it may or may not. It would certainly be a significant issue. It would depend on the amount, but it'd certainly be something that we'd have to disclose because a fraud matter would need to be disclosed.
I guess my question is what, because financial is not necessarily mine. That's your field of expertise. I guess I'm kind of curious. What's the basis for the question? Or
Well, the basis is, if there's no segregation of duties and the checking account never exceeds $1,000, let's say, and $1,000 gets, ripped off, that's not going to make an impact on the financial statements as a whole and reach a level of materiality. That's kind of what I'm asking is, are these segregation of duties issues, could it impact materiality?
Probably if there was an issue with fraud at every school that was in this list, then it would be.
Yeah. But a single school.
But a single school, probably not, particularly in the smaller schools. Particularly like, I'll just take, Adrian Burnett had $116,000 in cash at the end of the year, but that's out of, nearly 19 million. So.
From a big picture standpoint, I think you mentioned this in the opening comments, but it does seem like a number of the issues noted here, including segregation of duties, impacted a larger number of schools this year.
Yes.
Is there any tracking done of which schools that is versus just the number of the school?
Yes.
Because I would assume, correct me if I'm wrong here, a lot of these are initially elementary schools, just thinking smaller ones. I don't know if it rises to all levels, but I think it would be helpful to know, school X rectified these issues. School Y was a new addition to this list.
They certainly are predominantly a combination, primarily elementary schools, but also some alternative schools, which are generally even smaller than elementary schools.
I'm just trying to see over time, which ones are, can we see which ones are, I'll say improving. I know this is kind of binary with segregation of duties, but which ones have come off the list versus which ones are getting added to the list?
They are tracked every year. We track it, and I know Garrett Raiden, where Internal School Funds has a tracking sheet as well that he maintains every year, and he has a record of that. And school management has a record of that, yes.
Because I think the other thing that'd be helpful is to know which schools, and again, kind of trending versus individuals, but which ones this is repeated year after year after year because
And there's a second part to that as well, because it's not always just the school, it's a matter of, was there a change in bookkeeper, or did the bookkeeper go from school A to school B, and the same thing with principal, so, there are different facets to it.
Where you're heading is where I was getting to, because as the audit committee, we can certainly look at it, report on it. We can't take action on it. The school board needs to take action on it. And I think the two things that I've learned in reviewing these time after time and talking to the auditor is that is the biggest issue that continues to happen is, one, you have a lot of people that are in schools that are not, they don't come from a financial background or an accounting background. They're often, people that are doing 2 or 3 or 4 jobs in the office and maybe also doing the bookkeeping, but there's not a central hiring mechanism from the finance department of Knox County Schools to hire the bookkeepers from the, as a trained team, because they could be doing any number of different things. And then ultimately, if one school has issues time and again, it really is, it's up to the central office and the principal to figure out, are there disciplinary issues, are there personnel changes, and frankly, most schools have, everybody's got 9 jobs, and so, it's often somebody's not replaced because they made a mistake, even if they've done it 3 or 4 or 5 times, because they also do so many different things in another office. So it's hard for us as an audit committee. We can point to it and we can talk about it, but ultimately, your board has to hold your team accountable to actually change stuff. Most of the time, findings we tend to see are pretty small and could be normal mistakes in the accounting world, but then every once in a while one pops up that's huge, and we just go, how in the world did they miss that? And I think that's the hard part for this committee is we can't do anything about it.
Do the schools from, whether it's, Andrew Burnett or Gibbs or Retta or whoever, is there across the system, is there a standard operating procedure system plan to, so that whoever the bookkeeper is, if, like you said, they may be doing 3 or 4 different things. If it's a smaller school, a smaller office, do they have that in place?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question for Garrett. I know y'all so much work into trying to fix some of these improvements. If there's any of these that maybe some of the improvements you were gonna try, if you can maybe mention where some of those did help us, with these findings that, because I think you're doing more sometimes than we can see. And just from going through the findings, give a chance to level the playing field there on the findings.
I'll take the start of that one for Garrett, and he can fill in some details. I'll start with, we agree with you all that this number of segregation of duties findings is too many, and our goal is to reduce that. While it is harder in some schools to get a pure segregation of duties than in other schools, this is still too many, and our goal is to reduce it. Yes, we're doing several things. One, I think that, as you all remember, we had the salary study and salary implementation a couple of years ago at this point. I think we talked about it here a couple of months ago as well. That has helped in both our retention and the attractiveness of the job for our bookkeepers. The pay increased, which has increased our retention, and then also just the quality of candidates that we're getting is increasing. So I think that is helping us and will continue to help us. One thing that we're doing this year, starting this year, we always submit the corrective action plan on behalf of the district in response to the audit findings. Beginning this year, each individual school is also submitting their own corrective action plan to the district, to us, so that we can know what steps at the school level are being taken. Because yes, The finance department trains bookkeepers, finance department ultimately responsible for the oversight, but at the school level, the principal and the bookkeeper are the biggest factor day to day in reducing those audit findings. So excited about that as well, excited about the movement we can see from that. And then in addition, I think that this is in the audit report as well, but we have engaged Pew outside of this audit process to also audit our practices and procedures, best practices, to identify areas across the district that aren't necessarily audit findings, but where we can get better in an effort to reduce our audit findings.
So what you're saying is that as far as the bookkeeper, when you say you implemented salary, they were hourly before?
No, they were monthly before. They were salaried employees before. It's just increased.
Okay.
I'm gonna say for the record, could you go ahead and state your name?
Sorry about that. Yes, Jennifer Himmelgarn, Knox County Schools.
Yeah. And I really appreciate where the effort's been there. I mean, I think the salary adjustments last year are gonna really pay dividends for the county. And I know these numbers will never be zero. I just don't wanna lose sight as we go through the list that, we talk about there's 5 additional ones, but we're starting with a baseline of 44 in that number. And I think a number of the items are like this. So it may be a policy type issue that maybe the policy is not appropriate at this point, but I just don't want to lose sight of where that baseline is coming from, because I think it is important for the county.
I'm gonna move to number 2 then.
Like I say, we took down
Okay, which is negative fund balances, and this is an area that actually had significant improvement to where we label it under summary of, compared to last year or summary of prior year findings, we've recorded it as partially corrected. They had 9 issues in the prior year, and this would be any line item in the school's report. So there's thousands of them, any individual fund in any school. We had 2 this year. We really had 1 because the second one really was a matter of an account receivable not being reported. It was really just due to oversight. So we had 1 that happened that didn't get caught. So from my perspective, while we want 0, 1 or 2, it's pretty good. So that's an area that I think the schools did well in this past year. And they weren't large amounts either. Any questions about number 2? Number 3 gets into the documentation areas, and this one is, number 3 is disbursements. And in the condition area, there are 7 bullet points for what we would consider a finding. This year we had 57 schools that had an exception, at least 1 exception in disbursements. Prior year we had 53 schools, so still a pretty high number, and actually an increase. Some schools just had 1, but others might have had 3 or 4. So it's easier to track them by school. But this is another area that we would like to see number of exceptions go down. I don't think you're going to get away with this. It's never going to go away, but this is always an area that I would like to see fewer exceptions.
So one of the points I think Commissioner Jackson was kind of at least alluding to, do you have any idea of the magnitude of the total here from a disbursement standpoint? Because I know these could be small checks or large checks.
For the most part, our exceptions are with smaller dollar items. There's probably a few exceptions to that, but the majority of these are smaller transactions.
How small is it?
So let's say $25.
That's reasonable.
One thing to remember is that there are some larger transactions that run through the schools, but the majority of the transactions are just, you have a huge number of small dollar transactions at the individual school items.
Do you feel as though some of these issues that we've had might require maybe like agreed upon procedures to maybe look at it again in 6 months? And again, this is a school board issue, not an audit committee issue, but
I guess that's really a school board decision. Of course, we are looking at it every year in great detail because we'll select several transactions at each school. So it's done on an annual basis at least. I mean, it wouldn't hurt, but I don't know that it would be worth the benefit. Since it's looked at every year, if it wasn't looked at every year, I think that would be different. Or I would think there would have to be some new procedures in place, maybe after the best practices audit. So I guess my best answer would be that let's see what recommendations that we have from the best practices review, and let's see what the schools want to implement. Probably at that point in time, we'll see what exceptions we have next to audit, and at that point, there could be a consideration of needing to do one mid-year the following year.
thank you.
All right. Number 4, receipts. Pretty much we had the same number of schools that had exceptions for receipts. 60 one year, 60 last year, 60 for FY25. And there are 6 bullet points where there can be issues of what we identified as issues of receipts. Goes down to teacher logs, to not depositing within 3 days, or any differences between makeup of the deposit ticket, the supporting documentation. So that there's a majority of them really deal with collection log or support issues. And part of that goes to collections that are being handled within the classroom. Any other questions? Number 5 is purchase orders. And this one also had an increase in instances. These schools impacted 64 schools. We had issues with one of the 3 conditions listed there compared to 58 the prior year. And really, disbursements and purchase orders would typically go hand in hand, so we had a few more issues in that area. And part of them will deal with approval or pre-numbered purchase orders, or sometimes purchase orders being completed after the date of purchase. If you go get something at the store and it's documented.
I know these are getting, at least from where we set minimal number earlier, $25, these are all $100+ Is there any overlap in the ones that you tested between the purchase order exceptions and the disbursement exceptions?
There would be some overlap in those.
Y'all make sure any purchase orders are where things can go haywire sometimes, good or bad, or intentional or unintentional. And I don't know, if you find something, do you make sure that somehow it was compensated for, or we still got the goods or the contract performed, or just whatever the example might be?
Yeah, sometimes it was approval after the fact when it needs to be done in advance. We didn't see any issues that we considered fraud, for instance, but really more or less process and using an appropriate approval process.
I noticed on here, you said one of the conditions was, pre-numbered purchase orders were not always completed properly or issued for purchases of $100 or more. So they have pre-numbered purchase orders ahead of time that they would fill out for whatever they're purchasing, correct?
Yes, they're supposed to be done in advance of the purchase.
In advance of the purchase, and if it was over $100, that would be standard. Right, and so you said you had 64 schools, which is more than what we had last year.
64 schools had exceptions, yes. They're required to have the pre-numbered purchase orders when the purchase for over $100.
Okay. And just having one instance of that would count as a school having an exception.
That's correct.
Okay, so it could have just happened one time, it's not necessarily a perpetual problem. It may just be, it happened one time and it was found.
Probably a little bit of the combination of both. With the number of schools that we had an instance, it's still significant, but yes, we might have tested a sample of 20 or 25 items and had one exception, and that would mean that one school had an exception.
Okay.
And so you can use sometimes what they're calling the third bullet, the credit cards that would not have a pre-numbered PO with them. Is that what you're talking about in the third bullet there?
No, that credit card would have its own approval process. All right, number 6, ticket reconciliation. And as again, in each case, the condition is really the section where the exception is identified, and we had 13 schools of not following proper procedures for completing and maintaining ticket reconciliations for school-sponsored events, compared to 12 a year ago. This is an area where you have a lot of volunteers and really difficult to manage. This is one, as much as I would like to see it go away, there'd have to be some significant changes in structure, just because the number of volunteers that are involved in the football game or school play or whatnot. So, but this is an exception for ticket reconciliation for school-sponsored events that has a fee associated with it.
Is that all done? Thanks. My kid's in elementary school, so we haven't seen many ticket events. But is it digital or is it manual still? For these events?
It's
mostly digital.
Predominantly digital.
Okay.
We're encouraging more digital.
Yeah.
But yes,
It's
I would
not-
say we're not fully digital.
I thought I had heard that it was going digital. I thought you would have seen some.
Garrett Reed in Knox County Schools. It's been digital for about 5 years, probably 6 years, but that doesn't mean the schools are using it. Remember, there's a very big opinion point that we have to remember because the bookkeepers don't report to finance.
Okay, number 7 is fundraising and resale activities. There's an increase here. We had 41 schools with exceptions, up from 25. The biggest area here where we had an increase was in sales tax matters. And sales tax fundraising and resale, kind of an awkward combination there, but that's how it's actually written in the manual, so that's why we lump them here. But again, there's 3 conditions here that could have an exception, and the bulk of these really were sales tax related. Either paid or not paid. These are small dollar amounts usually.
What would be an example of that? I mean, like an elementary school doing a fundraiser.
Well, the sales tax issue would really be like someone goes to the store to buy something and they pay a sales tax when they they don't have to pay sales
So
tax.
so like somebody from the school is going to purchase supplies or something.
Yes.
They should have been tax exempt, but they just went ahead and paid the sales tax.
Yes.
Probably because it takes time to do that.
Right, and they're like, we'll just pay the sales tax.
And there's really, I expect this area to go down significantly next year. I know there's, the cards that they use are set up so that it's not really a difficult process for it to be tax exempt. There's a system in place that hopefully will show better results in the coming year. Number 8, the school support organizations, and this is really a challenge for school administration, just the control and communication coordination with school support organizations. This finding area, let me interpret the condition, actually has significant improvement during the year, because there's 2 areas that cause consternation for schools. One would be the large number of school support organizations, because there's more to manage. And then the second would be how many of those are not registered with the central office or the director of schools. In this case, there were 81 of 184 known school support SSOs that received approval from the director of schools. And a year ago it was 31 out of 237. So the total number of SSOs went down and the number registered went up. So a lot of progress in this area, but it's still a challenging area. I know a lot of communication is made in this area, a lot of effort is made by the schools in trying to have the appropriate control in place.
I assume these are the larger schools that have the problem with this, high schools.
Generally, you can have a lot more SSOs in high schools. Number 9, approval of transfers, and this is an area that went down significantly, 24 instances the year before, 13 the current year, and there's a lot of cleanup in this area. I wouldn't be surprised if this nearly goes away, looking at the direction I believe this is heading, so this is heading in the right direction. Time unless there's questions, I'll go into that. And travel policy is another one, the administrative oversight I understood. There's a lot of work been done. Prior year was 8, it was much higher the year before that, it's down to 5, and really, I wouldn't be surprised if this is near eliminated in the next year. The process has been around long enough that I think the controls and everyone understands it, and good chance it will either go away or nearly go away, or potentially get wrapped up in the segregation of duties as a bullet point. But at one point, this was a significant matter. Okay, there are 2 new findings this year, and those are 11 and 12. We had one instance of a supplemental salary payment that was paid through the internal school funds. All supplementary salary payments are required to be paid through central office. One fell through the cracks, and so it's reported here as a finding as required by the state.
Was that like coaching?
Yeah, a school paid a coach or assistant coach money directly. And
Did you several instances of that?
we had one instance of that, one instance at one school. Then on number 12, we had participation fees improperly collected by SSOs. So basically, coaches, we had 3 instances of, for instance, a coach charging fees directly to participant and collecting the fees themselves. So,
When you say collecting it themselves, you mean into the booster club or into their personal checking?
either or.
Okay.
But they did not go through the school itself, which is what the requirement is.
So, if that's the case, how did you find it? Normally through the internal school, normally through Garrett Rate. Somebody talked.
Yes.
Okay.
And often they are self-reported to the state, and the state also contacts us, but they contact us.
Okay.
So, yeah, otherwise, that would be something hard for us to find out
Right.
on our own during the course of the audit.
Like you
Since
said,
it doesn't hit the books.
Right, it doesn't go through the normal channels that you're looking at.
Correct.
Okay.
But we do, part of our audit also is inquiring of every bookkeeper and every principal, and that would be another way that we could find out that we do specifically ask. So those are the findings this year. The following page, it's report page 507. I don't have a PDF page for that, but it should be the very next page.
419.
419, okay. This is the schedule of prior year findings. You'll note that the first 10 findings were repeated. There were findings 1 through 10 this year. 11 and 12 did not have an instance like that this year, but important to note on number 11, the finding itself, which was external fraud incident involving credit card theft, was corrected. There were no current year issues with raising credit limits or unassigned credit cards, which impacted the amount of the FY24 fraudulent charges. We did note that the bank charged back approximately $174,000 of the FY24 fraudulent charges during fiscal year 25. So, to note. We did not have any issues, like I said, though, with raised credit limits, which led to the external fraud situation this year. There were a couple credit cards that had fraudulent charges. The dollar amounts were small, and they were quickly returned. So, and it's not a current year finding, because there were no issues there were no circumstances in the current year that the school controlled that related to that, but as appropriate follow-up on the prior year issue, that's why it's reported there. And then on
Question.
Yes, go
Question,
ahead.
if you don't mind. I remember last year, we discussed the P cards
Yes.
and improving the internal controls, because if I recall, the fraud happened because somebody got a hold of the credit card and then went out of the area. And, being able to tighten the controls on the P cards where, if you're outside of East Tennessee, it's gonna, it's gonna flag it. Do you have any idea whether those P card controls were tightened?
I know the oversight of the P cards has been tightened, and as a result, last year's amount was a significant amount. I think the largest amount this year was roughly 14,000. I could be wrong, and that was quickly returned. And the number of instances were not significant this year. So the oversight improved. I can't specifically answer the question regarding the area of where the credit card charges happened. But I do believe that's part of the school's oversight, is looking at, when they see a credit card charge, and if it's in Arizona or if it's in Brazil, then they know it's something to look at really closely.
I would just add to that, Zach Fuller's an internal audit. We've been working on an internal school funds procurement card audit, so specifically around that topic that we discussed last year. It's in the final stages. We've got the draft. I'm working through the draft. So I think at next audit committee, we'll sort of dig into that and what those controls look like.
And then the 12th one a year ago was supplemental salary payments from SSOs, and that matter was corrected. So 2 matters were corrected, 2 new matters. One of them, one of the new ones though, it's really out of the school's control. It dealt with SSOs and, I guess it dealt with it dealt with monies that didn't hit the school's books. Any other questions?
And the only comment I would make having to do with, I think it was comments about, us going over this audit report since the schools get it, and it was for them to, in the charter of the audit committee meeting, it specifically mentions we'll at least have review and discussion of it. So, and I remember early on when I didn't realize schools were seeing them and the commission was seeing them in the internal audit, the audit committee at the same time. And Ted had to explain to me that, you all see it first, and I think you were like sometimes people have more questions than others, particularly going back a few years. So I think it's good for us to know that, and because I've sort of always watching for these little gotchas in the charter that it would say we were somehow doing them, so, and I've always felt comfortable that, okay, we're complying with that. And I think we're almost pretty much in agreement as to those that can be quickly taken care of and those that are just gonna never go away, like some of your children. Whatever that's worth.
But we received excellent cooperation from the schools during the course of the audit, very transparent things. Internal school funds, later Garrett will maintain a list of issues that come up and that they evaluate internally and address internally that we also review. So it's a transparent process. That helps for a more effective audit.
Nothing else there. Thank you, Ted. As a time check, I know we're about to move on to the governance audit. Is everybody good on the time? Okay. We'll move over to the governance audit then. Shelby, absolutely.
Hello, Audit Committee, Shelby Davis. This is Nathan Wallace. Nathan and I will be taking you all through the governance audit, which is recently completed. So right off the bat, I wanted to let you all know that there were no findings to this audit. We did parse out 3 opportunities for improvement, which Nathan will discuss for you all later. And I wanted to thank everyone who helped us complete this audit. It was very large in scope. It required the attention of many individuals, and we want to thank everyone who cooperated and for all their assistance with this audit. So if you want to turn with me to page I, that's our executive summary. So why did we do this audit? It was included in the fiscal year 2026 audit plan because of recent events in Knox County at the Juvenile Detention Center, exposing some risks caused by lack of governance oversight. So what did we look at? Our objective was to assess whether Knox County boards and committees are, one, configured and operating in a manner that supports Knox County's mission, 2, complying with acceptable charters, ordinances, bylaws, and 3, providing effective oversight. And our scope included governing bodies such as boards and committees that are related to Knox County governance who were active as of August 1st, 2025. So when I say related to Knox County government, what does that mean? That means they are boards and committees who receive county funding or assets, exercise authority affecting the county, are appointed or recognized by county leadership, receive sustained county staff support, or include elected officials serving in an official capacity. And that list is there for you in the executive summary. So if you want to turn with me to page 1, this is our background. And I'm aware that you all are very knowledgeable about the history and the general governance structure of Knox County, but just for clarity, let me remind you all that Knox County is a charter form of government. And with this structure comes great freedom to self-govern, and with that freedom comes some inherent risks. And Knox County government has 3 broad branches: the Sheriff's Office, Knox County General Government, and Knox County Schools. And under these 3 branches exists a vast array of governing boards and committees who exercise various levels of control over different parts of our government. So moving on to page 2, our conclusions. The first question we sought to answer was whether or not key organizational leaders are aware of the boards and committees connected to their organization. And we found that generally yes, individual stakeholders of each branch of Knox County government were generally aware of the departments which they oversaw. However, as we'll detail shortly, it was very difficult to ascertain the full number of active boards and committees that relate to Knox County government. And as a result of this, we identified our first opportunity for improvement, and Nathan will go over that with you all in a minute. The second question we sought to answer was whether or not Knox County boards and committees are configured and operating in a manner that supports Knox County's mission and complies with applicable governing authority. And we found that generally yes. However, throughout the course of our testing, we found that there was a great deal of variance in how these boards and committees were operating. And as a result of this, we have our second opportunity for improvement. The third question we sought to answer was whether or not Knox County boards and committees are operating with proper governance oversight. And we found that yes, generally there was effective oversight structure in place in our sampled entities. However, we did discover one entity who may benefit from a more formalized reporting structure. So moving on to page 3, this is the what we tested section. Our review period included August 1st, 2024 through August 1st, 2025. And as I mentioned previously, ascertaining all the active boards and committees relating to Knox County government was a large undertaking. So we interviewed stakeholders with all 3 branches, including schools, sheriff, and general government. And we also looked to online and historical databases. And this led us to compiling a list of 123 boards and committees. From this original population of 123 boards and committees, we judgmentally assigned entities a risk rating of high, medium, or low. To assign these ratings, we used risk factors such as relevance, level of county involvement, likelihood of mismanagement, and effectiveness of oversight. After this, we removed 28 entities that were either found to be dissolved or were outside of project scope, and we had 95 remaining. All the low risk entities were excluded, and additional exclusions were made among high and medium risk groups based on independence issues, recent or upcoming audits, and existing strong oversight controls. As a result, 29 boards were selected for detailed testing. We later found out that one of the boards we selected did not have a board, and we'll talk about that in OFI 3, and that one of our sampled entities was in the process of dissolving. So that left us with a final a sample of 27. And these entities are listed in figure 2 on page 3. We do need to mention that we cannot provide reasonable assurance for 3 boards included in our sample, and Zach's going to talk about this a little bit later. There are 2 boards for which we can only provide limited assurance. This is the Young Williams Animal Center and the Knox County Employees Credit Union. And I do want to mention that these boards were communicative with us. They just could not provide all the documentation we requested as they wanted to keep their meeting minutes confidential. And because of that, we can only provide limited assurance. There is one board for which we can provide no assurance. This was the Board of Equalization, as they declined participation. And again, Zach's going to talk about this a little more in a moment. So on page 4, what did we actually look at? We had 2 parts to our testing. We reviewed documentation, and we conducted an anonymous survey. The first part, the documentation review. First, we established some testing criteria. We developed a list of recognized best practices for governing bodies, and we created this criteria based on guidance for boards, commissions, and committees published by CTAS and the Institute of Internal Auditors. And the types of documentation we requested is shown for you all in figure 3 on page 4. We then reviewed this documentation and compared it to our criteria. And that led us into our opportunity for improvement number 2. The second part to our testing was the anonymous survey. We created an anonymous online survey form that was open from October 15th to December 10th, 2025. And we asked a variety of questions designed to gauge engagement and gain a better understanding of board operations. While we encouraged full board participation, only 1 response per board was required to complete the testing. And from this survey, we gleaned several insights. These are listed for you all in figure 4 on page 5. We observed several positive areas of success and that no redundant boards were uncovered, board responsibilities were generally well-defined, and vacancies are generally filled quickly. We did observe some areas to improve in that some board members are unsure how to nominate new board members. Board members don't always feel like they have adequate onboarding or training, and board members are unaware about the existence of their bylaws, and these led into OFI 2 as well.
All right, so Nathan Wallace, Knox County Internal Audit. So I'm gonna go over the opportunities for improvement we have. So although no deficiencies rose to the level of audit finding, we did identify 3 areas where improvement could be had. So first, OFI 1 on page 6, a centralized database of Knox County boards and committees. So Knox County lacks a single authoritative inventory of all boards and committees. When we say boards and committees, we kind of cast a wide net with our scope in order to attempt to identify any potential county adjacent entities like the Juvenile Detention Center previously existed as. So you'll see we looked at entities like Kema and like Young Williams, where neither of those are really county boards, like say the Beer Board or the Board of Zoning Appeals. However, Young Williams is our animal control, and Kema handles our state mandated emergency management plan, so their governmental integration is high. And if something went wrong, the county would be on the hook. So that's why we included them. During our research, we found that information on boards and committees is fragmented across different departments and highly dependent on institutional knowledge. To be candid, it was incredibly difficult to get a list of all the boards and committees which actually operate within Knox County. To get the list we have, it required extensive research into historical audits, commission minutes, and numerous county and county adjacent websites. This information was then confirmed and expanded upon by meetings with Knox County Finance, the Sheriff's Office, the Knox County School Board, the Mayor's Chief Operating Officer, and Commission Chairwoman Officer, alongside supplemental information from the Mayor's own appointment list. All that being said, this gave us what is most likely the most complete list that's existed in 20 years. But we still cannot provide absolute assurance that we caught everything. This could create a risk of boards being overlooked during leadership turnover. Our suggested improvement is to establish a formal process to maintain a centralized repository. We put together an informational tool to help identify boards and committees in Appendix B of this report, which would be a good starting point for anyone who wanted to get this repository going. This list is all the identified boards and committees which we judgmentally selected as potentially valuable to be included in this hypothetical repository. Any questions regarding that? All right, moving into OFI 2. On page 7, governance practices could be refined. While our testing did not identify significant issues of noncompliance, we identify areas where governance practices could be improved on. First, variability exists in the quality and completeness of bylaws and charters. So for the purposes of this report, a charter is defined as the document that establishes a board or committee's source of authority and outlines its general powers and responsibilities. And bylaws typically govern the internal operations of a report by a board or committee and may address matters such as membership structure, roles, responsibilities, appointment processes, meeting procedures, quorum, and processes for amendment. With that being said, 6 boards did not have their own bylaws, with several relying on state statutes or local ordinances rather than having their own specific set of bylaws. And it's easy to say that if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but if something did break regarding the governance of a board who relies solely on local ordinance to dictate their board operations will then have to change the ordinance to change the operation. And operating under board-produced bylaws allows for the board to better adapt to the ever-changing landscape surrounding local government. This does not mean they don't have to abide by any higher authority. The state sets a standard, that we still have to meet it. We're just suggesting that boards and committees adopt their own board operations bylaws as a best practice. Second, still on OFI 2, Many boards lack formal orientation or training for new members. So the results of our anonymous survey showed 9 out of 25 boards responded that they did not have sufficient onboarding. Additionally, other responses in that survey indicated that some board members lacked clarity regarding key administrative aspects of their boards. This is stuff like the existence and purpose of bylaws, procedures for amending any government documents, and criteria for appointing new members. So our suggested improvement there is just to implement standard onboarding training for new members. Any questions on that? On OFI 3 on page 9, formalize HEMA reporting. So the Knox County Emergency Management Agency, HEMA, operates as both a city and a county organization and do not have a governing board or committee. The director of HEMA reports directly to the city and the county mayor's office respectively. However, this reporting has not been formalized through any official documentation. This creates a risk around change management. The current director, he is very squared away. He's regularly reporting to the county, and he was very open to conversation with internal audit. However, he won't be with HEMA forever. And to mitigate that loss of skill and institutional knowledge, formal documentation of that reporting structure needs to be implemented. For example, if the next mayor may not be aware to check in on HEMA, or conversely, the next director of HEMA may not pursue the same level of transparency and communication that our current one does. So we suggest documenting reporting expectations from HEMA to the county in a formal operating procedure in order to mitigate that risk of communications breaking down as leaders change positions. It's generally best practices to have formalized reporting structures within an organization. So our suggestion for HEMA to formalize that process is applicable to all city-county organizations to mitigate that risk surrounding change management. Any questions? That concludes our RFIs. We conducted this audit in accordance with generally accepted government auditing standards, and our scope is listed on both the executive summary and on page 10 of the report. Our authority to engage in the audit is listed on page 10 as well, which Zach will discuss in further detail. Before he starts, are there any questions regarding this audit?
I think straight turn on Appendix B.
It's mistakes.
So for anyone who doesn't have a copy on Appendix B, it's just sort of a chart that lists the boards and committees, and it's sort of broken down into the wings of county government, county commission, the mayor's office, the sheriff's office, board of education, and then some county adjacent organizations as well. I think there's 87, maybe some on boards on here, seem to be the most relevant ones that we would want to track going forward. So
could you make sure that gets to the chair of commission and Drusilla? I think it's relevant information that the commission during their orientation should definitely get going forward. And I know she tries to keep an update of what it is, but I think it's just good for us to understand there's probably a whole nother chart of who appoints all these people and who has the statutory authority. I mean, I know most of the utility boards are done by the mayor, and I'm sure there's 1,000 other wings to this, but it's a great start. So,
yeah, we'll definitely get that over.
And I can tell this took a lot of time, so thank you to everybody involved. So
we had a historical audit that was done in, I want to say 05.
Yes,
that had some boards in it. It was an audit of boards and committees, and as you can imagine, it's a lot different in 2025.
It's expanded incredibly.
Yeah.
Your auditor, the auditor at that time?
It was the auditor at that time. It did, yeah. But as far as the three entities that did not want to be a part of this engagement, so let me just talk in general. This was a really high-level review. We wanted to look at things like, are you meeting? Are you keeping minutes? Are you filling vacancies? Things like that. And then, of course, any information that's given to internal audit is held with the strictest confidentiality. So a little unusual to get audit resistance. For the credit union, they wanted their minutes to remain confidential. They wanted their bylaws to be confidential. They are not technically part of the county, They do live in this building. They bear the Knox County name. They have a space here that they're not charged for. They get some discounted IT services through KCIT. There's not any memorandum of understanding with the credit union, which to me is a little concerning, but that was what we got from them. They are obviously audited for the financials heavily through state regulations, so no issues there. Young Williams Animal Control, again, sort of one of those quasi-entities, right? They gave us everything except for their minutes, claimed that their minutes were confidential. They do run our animal services. They are, fulfilling a governmental operation, so would have felt like we would be able to get those. Board of Equalization, that's a state mandated, state established board, really, sort of flows through the property assessor's office. That board, the only difference there is a little bit that the members on that board are actually paid a small stipend to serve on that board, which is very unusual compared to other boards. But obviously they're, as I said, state sanctioned, so a little assurance there, but they did refuse participation. So I'd say just in general, for audit resistance, we faced a decent amount while performing this audit. Some of the things that were said to me, who are you to tell governing boards how to operate? You wouldn't go into the mayor's office and opine on how they operate. You should only be auditing financial information, nothing else. So, the message was a little clear to me, stay in your lane. So I thought just while we're here, everyone's at the table, we'd sort of just talk through a little bit briefly about what we do as an audit department. We conduct mostly performance audits, actually. We let the external auditors handle the financials. So, what is a performance audit, right? Well, we look at, it's sort of an independent examination of an organization's operations to assess whether those operations are working efficiently, effectively, and economically. So how do we approach that, right? Well, we spend a lot of time up front in the planning stages, researching best practices, applicable laws. We develop a detailed understanding of an organization's operations. And then from just sort of our objective and independent lens, we offer recommendations based on what we find. So, we never tell anyone to do anything, right? That's not our place. That's for management. We just make recommendations based on our understanding of the control environment, sort of the risks, and then what our testing shows. That's our focus. So, when you think about what's in the county code, well, the county code, it talks about the Department of Internal Audit performing financial and financial related audits, attestation engagements, and performance audits. So pretty direct there in the code. And then the code also goes on to say, what information is actually subject to audit. That's information, including financials held by each executive, legislative, and judicial agency, and of each public or private agency to which the county makes miscellaneous appropriations. So pretty broad applicability there. As far as the professional standards, you might wonder about those. Those explicitly talk about performance audits, how we are supposed to objectively assess the stewardship, performance, or cost of government policies, programs, and operations. So, there's the code, there's the professional standards. The state points to the performance of economy and efficiency audits, program results audits. It also notes that internal audit staff of local governments should perform audits in compliance with the IIA's standards that explicitly recommend audits related to risk management, controls, and governance. So why do I go over all of that, right? I just wanted for you all to have confidence that internal audit is operating within its jurisdiction. I think just this particular engagement caused a little bit of frustration from some entities that haven't engaged with us previously. And so the last thing I'd say is, and I say this with no ego at all, trying to be as humble as possible, but internal audit has a lot of authority afforded to it, right? We have a lot of access to information. We have a seat at the table for some important conversations, and the full commission, as the entity's really board of directors, puts a lot of trust in our department. And that authority that's afforded to us, I don't take it lightly. I promise you no one on the team takes it lightly. It would be really easy to have an internal auditor who acted maliciously or vindictively. Well, that's not us at all. I think we're very easy to work with. We feel like we're all part of the Knox County team and want the government to operate as efficiently and effectively as possible. So we approach things very collegiately. Don't put anyone on blast for policy issues, things like that. So when we get sort of stonewalled a little bit, it can be difficult. But that's my sermon on it. So any questions on the governance audit? Good. Okay. Well, let's jump into the board packet. Let's see here. Still got plenty of time. So Zach Fullerton, Internal Audit Director. On page 1, you're going to see our closed, ongoing, and upcoming projects. Obviously, we closed out the governance audit. I think it was a valuable project. We learned a lot. Sort of joked that Nathan and Shelby know more about the county than I do now, just because they're so familiar with these boards. So anyway, thanks to everyone who helped us on that engagement. 2 ongoing projects right now. I mentioned the Knox County Schools Internal School Funds Procurement Card Audit. Garrett, this ISF director, he's been really, really helpful throughout the audit. Weekly meetings with the team, which we love. It's in the draft stage. It has been in the draft stage, really just on me to get the draft done and reviewed through our quality control process. So goal is to cover that during our next audit committee meeting. Also started a control risk evaluation of the Three Ridges golf course. And included this in our plan originally as sort of a request from the Parks and Recreation Finance Director. Since then, the process has changed a lot. They have a new system that they've implemented. Looks to be pretty improved. We may have considered replacing this, but the Parks and Rec Finance Director actually just left a couple of weeks ago, a week and a half ago. So we thought, let's stick with it. Let's do what we do, our flow chart of the process. That way it'll be ready for the next person who sort of takes over that role. So in the fieldwork stages on that. Upcoming projects, again, those are things that were in our FY26 audit plan. Clerk and master data migration, just sort of making sure the files that they had transferred over to their new system correctly. Merit board performance audit, looking at sort of some key performance metrics for the merit board, probably some compliance checks based on their internal operating procedures. Also started an internal audit self-assessment, a little more formal engagement of just our quality processes. Gonna have Philip and Harrison working on that, and just looking back at past projects, making sure all of our T's were crossed, all of our I's were dotted, and then actually probably maybe even issuing a formal report just so you know sort of what we did in that process. And then in February, March, we'll look to start our FY27 risk assessment process. Page 2, just some general updates from the office. Wanted to, of course, take a second, welcome our newest audit committee member, Adam. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of the audit committee. A couple of weeks ago, I presented to the Knox County Ethics Committee. I think it was actually the subcommittee that's tasked with sort of reviewing and revising their code. Just talking to them a little bit about the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline. What our process looked like. It was pretty timely because I had just recently updated our IOPs regarding the hotline and added in a flow chart of the process. It's in your packet at the very back, and posted online in the packet. And it's just sort of a flow chart. Now, I'm not going to go into the details. It takes you through exactly how we handle complaints as they come in. Obviously, complaint-wise, fraud, waste, and abuse, right? So that's when you get into this wing of how we process them. If it's not related to fraud, waste, and abuse, if it's a policy issue, if it's a schools issue, there are partner entities that we would sort of send that off to. So anyway, we can review that and let me know if you have any questions.
I think you have I want for new members of the board and anybody in general, the Knox County Audit team has a really robust website that has tons of information and all their reports, so that it's all very transparent to the public. I think that this chart ought to be front and center, maybe even add a line of like the process. You have a couple of places with, you have another sort of flow chart of like, what can we do for you? But I mean, this process is of what we do. A lot of what you explained of who are we, where does our authority come from, what do we do, what's our purpose? You have a little bit of that, but this flow chart should definitely be added to the website. I think it's really helpful for people to just understand what you do and how you do it.
We definitely will. And I would also add to that, just so the public is aware, because someone asked me this after I presented to ethics committee, every complaint we receive is entered into our audit software and either internally investigated or transferred to one of our partner agencies. Absolutely everything.
So I have a question about that.
Sure.
All right, so you're going to have to come in that you'll say you're going to really, I think you're going to send that to somebody else that should go to. Now, if this comes into the hotline, that's coming through a rather confidential situation, so when that gets passed over to wherever you send it to, do they hold it to that same degree? So that, and really, I think that's designed to, not give away, it's submitted confidentially.
Sure.
So,
Well, I think, if someone.
I mean, are they even aware that it's come from that angle?
I think if someone included any identifying information in their complaint, we would likely redact that
Name and phone number.
before we transferred it. Yes, sir. But, HR, our partner agencies, HR, the Sheriff's Office, Office of Professional Standards, state and federal partners, the Comptroller's Office, they are also going to maintain the strictest level of confidentiality. But yes, we would redact some personal information to make sure that the individual can be confident that their information will remain confidential.
I mean, y'all done real well with the hotline over the past few years and where it was. 'Cause I guess it used to fall under risk management once upon a time, and we worked to get that under the audit committee. And then I guess y'all are still using the software package that kind of does your audit reports as well as the hot cell.
Right, our audit software, it's called HighBond. It allows us to set up sort of an online portal and post questions in that portal that people can then access on our website, fill out, and submit the complaint that way. And we also have the main line. People can call. So, let me talk briefly about our peer review. So, our generally accepted government auditing standards require our office to have a peer review every 3 years, right? And conducted every 3 years by an external audit agency. Our last peer review was finalized May 23rd of 2023. That was completed under the prior internal audit director. So when I took over as director, I put a reminder on my calendar to initiate that process in January of 26 for it to be completed in May of 26, 3 years after the last assessment. I reached out this month to schedule that with the Association of Local Government Auditors, and I was told that the 2023 review was actually performed late during a COVID grace period, so that our review should have been done in 25. I, of course, pled ignorance. I had no idea that there was a COVID grace period in 2023. It seems a little late to me. But so what does that mean exactly? Well, technically, we'll be late for our peer review. There'll be a note maybe in our review that says that. I don't like it. Again, I didn't know about the COVID grace period. As someone who sort of maintains a rigid schedule, task list, annual plan, it's aggravating. But what can we do? We'll get back on the right schedule. If they do include it in our management letter, I know most won't care. I will remember it until the day I die.
Fly with yourself. It's like a circular firing squad.
Lance, when you said peer review, it's we're in our cycle now too.
That's the worst thing you ever did.
We'll be okay.
Well, the fun part is that to get one from Alga, I have to go and perform one for another county. So a little quid pro quo. I've been drafted to go to Hanover County, Virginia, to do a peer review for their audit shop in May. So maybe we'll bring back some fresh ideas from Hanover, things we can implement here. But I'll be going to do that.
Keep up the good work.
So, still got 10 minutes. All right, so really quick. Did get to submit a FY27 budget request to finance. Actually, the first time we've been able to do that since I've been director, so that's fun. But just as an update, the only real thing that changed in our requested budget was the education and training. We have more people now, we have more certifications to maintain, more CPE requirements. Felt that needed to be increased. I just decreased some of the other buckets, so it's basically a wash. But it does say in our charter that I'll keep you all updated on our budget. So just a couple of management requests we worked on since we last talked. Knox County Payroll had reached out with some questions about the no tax on overtime provisions of the OBBBA bill.
Halftime, the overtime rate, right?
Yeah, so you might, when I first started the county, I think, payroll should be pretty standard, right? Well, it's not here. It's almost like our payroll department handles 5 to 10 different companies. So in this instance, you had some people who, for their overtime, they earn time and a half. Some get double time. Some get double time and a half. Some get a set hourly rate. Some get straight comp time. Some get comp time and a half. But really, the only portion that's tax exempt under the new bill is the fair, what's required by the Fair Labor Standards Act. time and a half. So some really complex calculations there. It's the FLSA OT premium. Either way, I had put together an Excel for payroll, the way to calculate that. The good news is for this year, if you're an employer, you don't actually have to report any of that to the employee this year. You just have to let them know if they're exempt or non-exempt. But next year, there'll be some W-2 requirements in place and the no finances on top of that.
So will they just put it on their own tax return?
They'll be responsible for doing their.
I was surprised when I read that at the time and a half, it only applies to the half time, not the next hour, so I can see that involved the types of double times that you mentioned.
It's hard to calculate it is. Second one, management requests, really a consulting engagement, just looking at some schools policies related to political campaign signage on school grounds. School board gets a lot of complaints about this, as you can imagine, especially in an election year. So we benchmarked our policies against Davidson, Hamilton, Shelby, did a little bit of legal background research, and then just offered our opinions and thoughts on maybe ways to tighten up those policies. Worked with the school board chair on that and gave her that information. Finalized our employee evaluations in November 2025. I know a lot of departments actually really don't do these, but I think it's important. Can't speak highly enough about the team. I like to take off every opportunity I can to. We've got 3 JDs on staff, 2 master's degrees, 2 certified internal auditors, 3 certified fraud examiners, 2 certified county financial officers. Really highly educated, highly qualified, hardworking group, inquisitive, creative. Really just want to do a good job for the department and the county. And, shout out to them. I hold them back if anything. So, good team. We're working through some revisions to our agreed upon procedures. These are projects that we do when an elected office changes hands. Obviously, there's a lot of elected offices on the ballot this year. We've done these in the past, but we're working through some expansions to those this year, just to offer more transparency to the public, more assurance to the public that the transition occurred correctly and appropriately. So we're going to cover that more and more detail during our next meeting. Hotline summaries on page 3. Got 3 new complaints since audit committee in October, closed out all 3 of those. Got 1 new complaint this week that's not reflected here, but I didn't want to print everything off new, but that's sort of where we're trending on the hotline. The only difference is I took out 2024 from the recent case outcomes, since we're just not looking at FY 25 and FY 26. Page 4, continuous auditing. So let's talk through some things we saw here. Vehicle usage, I'm not going to belabor that. No fraud, waste, or abuse. No real issues. On employee travel, that one always seems a little bit more complicated, right? So no fraud, waste, or abuse. A few things that caught our attention. Saw where an employee arrived to a conference location 2 days in advance of an event. I always say, I think arriving a day before is the right call. I've seen other situations where county employees arrive the day of the event and actually miss the beginning of it. But 2 days to me is pushing it. We reached out to the department. They told us that the flights on the selected day were more cost effective, even when you factor in the extra hotel stay. Obviously, there's no way for us to validate that. So told the traveler in the future, if that's the case, maintain documentation, right? Documentation will set you free. Just take some screenshots of the flight prices. No issues when you can lean back on that. Saw an instance where a traveler received full per diem on a day when they attended a conference and received a meal. Per policy, that's supposed to be 75%, so $20 discrepancy there. So one instance, 4th bullet point down, where we paid $1,100 for a mileage reimbursement for an employee to drive to a conference in Orlando. I imagine flights would have been cheaper. We reached out, we were told that the employee has a fear of flying and that the cost would have largely been a wash to pay for a flight and a rental car versus just straight mileage. Again, as I said, documentation set you free. Would have been nice to be able to see that. But the department indicated in the future they will maintain that documentation and only reimburse the employee for the cheapest rate of transport.
Who initiated this review? You got the continuous auditing?
These are just vehicle usage and travel reimbursements that we pull randomly each month as just part of a continuous engagement based on things that occurred in 2025. And these were just some random ones that we pulled.
Okay.
And then some just documentation things. You're always going to, missing conference brochure, missing pre-travel authorization, and just things we discussed with finance. Really just trying to get better as an organization. Recommendations on page 5, we can fly through those. Nothing due since our last meeting. No new recommendations were added, so nothing really changes there on 5 or 6. Still have 11 issues currently open, which we'll be following up on during 2026 as their due date arrives. So that's it for me. Any questions? Sorry about the peer review. You can tell it's been eating me up.
Zach, I am confident in saying that no one will remember it by about 13 minutes from now. Keep up the good work and do your job. You're fine.
Don't over exaggerate.
Maybe 10 minutes.
I hate to bust your bubble, but I participated in a couple of those when they were done. Our auditor, once somebody came here and then I guess they went somewhere else. But I started reading over some of the summer reports, and it's like, sure, I'll give you a good answer. We all had this, everybody had the same kind of response letter, and then, and how to word the cover letter, almost like a pro forma signature. Button pass.
That's what's important.
But you gotta do it.
We all really appreciate you guys and the department do for the county. With that, I know we're way over, but for planning for the next meeting, I know we've got a new commissioner on board. Is it good to schedule this on the day of the commission meeting still?
Works for me.
Okay. We'll keep that cadence then.
Yeah, that's important because we tried that for a while to do it on Mondays. Now, y'all used to have workshop
Yeah, this is gotta keep us all.
and then the other getting so.
It's easier for Drew as well. If we can log in on a sort of like 1 to 3 time frame for the Monday the commission meets, maybe do February, June, and October. She can schedule that and let everyone know that works for her.
We didn't do a lot of things.
So, Ted, would February, could that
Which
possible?
day would that be?
I think that's the 23rd, the Monday.
23rd would be fine.
Just send out some dates.
Yeah, that
March.
Retirement is in here.
If we get a motion,
I need a stretch.
Second.
second. All in favor?
All right.
Well done.